everyone. I just wanted to say a few things in review of the study questions for week 2 of the course involving these 2 BER cases. The question was really the same for both of them, and that is, on what basis did the Board of Ethical Review decide that the engineer in question acted unethically? I think that if we look at the first case, 01-10, involving the accepting of a trip on part of a recent engineering graduate, just to get to the heart of the matter, it comes down to intent and disclosure. If we see here, which I guess is on like the 3rd page of the thing, page 3, they just didn't buy the purported reason, purported reason for the engineers accepting of the trip. It says here, make it bigger. It was motivated by something more than the desire to broaden his, quote, knowledge of the employment market as well as future professional opportunities with XYZ. They just didn't buy that as the real motivation of the engineer. They thought it was much more likely, as they said. Instead, it appears that engineer A was using this opportunity for selfish personal gain and was merely establishing a rationalization for his decision to accept XYZ's offer of the trip. They just don't buy it. They think that the circumstances point to clearly towards a selfish reason, wanting to take a trip to basically a ski resort or something. So intent, essentially saying that the engineer engineer A was taking advantage of a prospective employer for his own personal gain and not being forthright, not being forthcoming, not being totally honest, not being transparent. And he had an opportunity to be transparent, right? That is, if we read on, it says, in this connection, the board believes that engineer A compromised his personal and professional integrity by his decision to accept XYZ's offer to visit their headquarters without disclosing his decision concerning ABC, the employer that he's all but committed himself to going with. So intent, which is, I don't know, it's a difficult question. How do you actually determine that? But they make their decision. And maybe especially disclosure, because that's something that's much more concrete. That is, whatever the state of mind of this young engineer, he could have disclosed things that were relevant to the thing. He could have been open and candid and forthright about the situation with the other employer. If he had done that, then I think there would be no ethical question. So I would say those are the real bases for the decision that he acted unethically. This undermined his commitment under the canons to act with integrity. So what was the other case? Sorry, I'm just doing this on the fly. I'm pretty sure I know these cases by now, but you never know. 05-3, is that what it is? Yes, 05-3, failure to respond to client. I think this may be a little bit more simple, a clearer basis for why they were acting, why they believe that the engineer is acting unethically. Really, the question that interests me is, well, clearly the engineer should have gotten back to the client. But does this rise to the level of an ethical infraction? Question for the board to consider. come to the end of it after comparing it to other cases, is whether in the present case, the failure of engineer A to respond to client X on each occasion for a 3-week period due to other business is of a similar nature to the failure of engineer B to promptly advise the client of the change in staffing set forth in his proposal to the client. However, it is the board's view that the circumstances involved in BR case number 78-6 related more to an apparent effort on the part of engineer B to mislead his client, so it's not really the same. While the present case appears to involve, this is where to really get to it. While the present case appears to involve more of a failure on the part of engineer A to respond to a client due to pending business commitments and does not indicate any intent apparent to mislead a client or a failure to correct a misunderstanding by the client. Okay, so it's not actively, they're not accusing the engineer of doing anything deceptive or acting in any way to positively undermine their client. But, as I said, having said that, the board still believes engineer A's failure to act, which resulted in client X missing a more favorable financing opportunity, rose to the level of an ethical lapse. That's what I find interesting in these cases. Does it actually rise? I mean, everybody knows that what they did was either wrong on some level or negligent or careless or not optimal. But does it rise to the level of an ethical lapse? That is, are we really talking about an actual ethical, question of an ethical infraction here? And they do believe that it did. And then the question is why? And they say all engineers have to balance a variety of professional and business priorities. Client X had no way to know of engineer's failure to respond would last 3 weeks, and therefore forcing him to miss a chance to seek the services of other structural engineers to perform the required services. The board cannot condone engineers' failure to be more responsive and concludes that engineer A's actions were a violation of the NSB Code of Ethics. And then we can ask ourselves, what part of the code was actually being violated here? I think is something that they should point out. We have to look back to the references. And I think the key references here, which is basically Canon 4. Engineers shall act for each employer or client as faithful agents or trustees. That's the the commitment to the client, the loyalty to the client, the idea that you are actually acting once you take on a client, that you are acting as their agent. That is, an agent for them, which means that you're committed to looking after their interests. And the failure to respond to them, which did or did not result in material harm to the client, constitutes a failure to live up to that role. So I think clearly it's a fourth canon case. Engineers shall act for each employer or client as faithful agents or trustees. And that is, the failure to get back over an extended period of time to this client constitutes really a breach, an ethical breach of that agreement to act as a faithful agent or trustee. That's what I would say the ultimate basis is for the decision that he or she acted unethically.